Okay, so recently we covered Oblivion Remastered. Obviously, this game has some profound stuttering issues, which to this day haven't been fixed. In actual fact, we were going to be doing a PlayStation console video, which we still can't do because the patch that Xbox received, which did improve average frame rates, but not really the stutter, that still hasn't arrived on PlayStation. So we've got no idea at the moment what's happening there. It's kind of bizarre. But anyway, let's go back to the matter of hand, the PC version, where there was some egregious stutter.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, what can I say? The modding community steps forth with a range of fixes. And here's the thing, Alex. This is a video we've been wanting to do for a long time, the nature of these stutter fixes that appear on Nexus mods and whatnot, because we have a long-standing theory that they don't actually do anything of any worth.
Yes.
And obviously with Oblivion having this egregious issue, we wanted to take a look at some of these mods to see whether they could actually make a difference. Now, there's two mods here. One which I suspected probably wouldn't do anything, and one which I thought, well, actually, there is perhaps some actual rational grounding that could actually result in better performance. But take it away. Show us your findings here.
Yes. Okay. So let me talk about the first mod. You got an email about this. I think to off-quote the email is like, install this mod and then change your shader cache settings in the NVIDIA driver to unlimited, and this is a stutter-free experience. And,
yeah, I mean, I filed it under things that make you go, but I didn't actually, it needed testing, didn't it?
It needed testing because this mod was actually technically interesting because it's doing something different. Now, I've heard about this type of mod before where, think about it, a game ships on your disk, a lot of them. They don't necessarily need to, but devs do this for bandwidth reasons and for disk reason on console primarily. They ship them in a compressed form that is then real-time decompressed while you're playing the game into your video memory or even in your standard system memory. So the game is on a compressed state on disk, and then it uncompresses into RAM or VRAM while you're playing, and that gives them, bandwidth savings when you're downloading the game. It can give you PCI bandwidth savings if direct storage is in play. On console, saves disks that you have to ship the game on. Some games wouldn't even work if they had to ship on multiple disks, so that's why they do that. And even back in the day, Oblivion, the original Oblivion, did this. It used real-time decompression of its stuff on disk while you're playing the game, and you'd go into a new sector of the game world and it would start decompressing the objects that you want to see. And this is also done in the Oblivion Remaster for the standard assets that the game ships with, as well as the game ships with the original Oblivion assets hidden away in the subfolder system there. And this mod here, it's called, I shall quote it, Oblivion BSA uncompressor. And this is one of them that apparently works for Oblivion Remastered. And what you have to do is you have to add these files to a plugin.txt, like the name. You have to manually uncompress the files. You have to use like all these mod tools that are designed for the original Oblivion for the remaster. But it's only applying to this subfolder structure of original Oblivion assets. Now, I did all that. Okay, let me just say that. I did all that. It was annoying. I did it. And I ran the game, a benchmark run of the game without this mod, and a benchmark run, 3 benchmark runs of the game with the mod. And as we're seeing here side by side, left is the vanilla, as I called it, and the right is the BSA uncompressed. As the benchmark run starts out, there are differences in overall frame rate. They peter out over the course of the run to being exactly equal. If you look at the frame times, they are the exact same for the most part. The hitches, the incidence of them, where they occur, their length are pretty much the exact same across the whole run. The run is about a 5-minute run through this entire side of the main city, just running along the path on a horse. I used it also in my video. The N degree difference between these runs was about a little less than 2%. It's about 1.9% in favor of this BSA uncompressed mod. Now, Rich, I think usually if you were doing a series of benchmarks, you would describe this as
Run-to-run variance.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, right? If you've got a GPU test, the run-to-run variance is usually much, much lower, like
Right.
circa 1%. The problem is when you're CPU limited, then, effectively all hell breaks loose, really. There's a much higher degree of variance between runs. So, yes, I mean, it's very, very rare that you get like matching frame times on a CPU based benchmark. What tends to happen is you'll see similar peaks and troughs, so to speak. You'll see similar instances of stutter or whatever, but there will be much more variance in those stutters.
Yep.
And the more stutters there are across the run, obviously that magnifies the margin of error across the entire run. Kind of makes sense, right? But yes, looking at these, the graphic you've got here, I'd say that it's not really doing much, if anything.
Yes.
Certainly to the degree. I mean, the point is that even if you do elevate all frame times like by 2%, you've still got the variance.
Yeah, it doesn't change anything. The variance is what we're trying to get rid of here. That is the main issue. The choppiness
of the
game.
Experience will be the same to the human perception. Yes.
Yeah.
So I actually thought this mod, when it was posited to me via email, that there might be something to it because you are actually removing a CPU-related task.
Yes, it is no longer real-time decompressing something technically. It's just uncompressed memory.
But you're saying this is related to the original Oblivion files, right?
Yeah, it's related to these original ESM and BSA files, not the extremely large packs that are sent with the game that contain all the nanite data, all the textures, all those things that are actually the real game running. And presumably one of the reasons why it's doing this.
In that scenario, I would venture to suggest that the decompression of 19-year-old game assets on a modern CPU is probably a non-issue.
It's going to be negligible because the original game is only going to be like 4 gigabytes compressed. We're talking about extremely low compression values that were made to run on Core 2 solos or Core 1 solos or whatever those things were that ran back then. So, this is, I'm going to say, this is busted. This doesn't do anything for the actual, the user experience. Now, the one thing...
but ini mods, Alex. It's all about the ini mods because developers don't know how to set up their inis, do they? So the community needs to step in to fix them.
Okay, so one thing that you see typically after every single Unreal Engine release, and even with a lot of other games, is that there are mods that come out. These are mods. I'm going to use the phrase mod here in really large quotations because I don't know if tweaking an ini file is really a mod. It's more like a tweak of the game's standard settings. I always think of mods as like things that are not shipped with the game, almost. That's just my opinion. But anyway, these tweaks, these ini tweaks, an ini is a file that games like Unreal Engine-based games use to essentially set variables as the game is starting and sometimes while it's playing that change things like graphical options. They'll change like loading behaviors. They'll change a variety of things. These are typically tweaks that are runtime or even real-time tweaks. And these always come out and they always have somewhat funny names like ultimate tweaks, ultimate engine tweaks, anti-stutter, low latency, no film grain, etc. They have a lot of names and they purport to do a lot of things like reduce latency, reduce the amount of hitching and stutters a game can have, reducing the GPU burden and load without affecting visuals. Now, I scrolled through the most popular one here on Ultimate Engine Tweaks. I scrolled through that ini file, Rich, and I found a lot of stuff where I actually have trouble understanding what it would do. So a lot of these some of these things only I sent a video to Oliver here. You can see it. Some of these things that change TAA settings, but some of them also seem like the default TAA values in UE5. Some of them change post-processing stuff that has nothing to do with performance, that is purely visual stuff. It could affect GPU performance, but no one cares about that. That's something you can do in games usually. There's stuff about getting rid of logging. Logging is the ability of the engine to essentially, for debugging purposes, in real time, it's making a log of all the stuff that's happening in the background so that developers can know what went wrong at one point when they're trying to debug the game. But Unreal Engine cooked ship builds do not come with logging turned on. So turning off logging shouldn't actually do anything for anything. Then there's a number of other things here that are Unreal Engine 4 specific because they're DX11 stuff. And then there's another group of items that could technically do something, as they are about changing the amount of like parallelization in the engine with single like 1 or 0 values. But realistically, Unreal Engine 5 is going to be made so that it isn't turning off parallelization and all these other tasks when it's cooked. There's no reason for it to do that. This is not a debug build. And it does a number of those other things, and it repeats them multiple times, actually. So you're supposed to drop this engine.ini file into the game's user folder. Pretty easy stuff. This is very standard stuff. And I just ran the game. And this time on the left-hand side, I already had the BSA uncompressed mod installed, so I just used that as my baseline. And then I did the engine.ini one on the right-hand side. And if you look here, this is almost like it's like a mirror run. It's almost like the exact same. And it runs a little worse in the beginning, hilariously enough. So I'm going to say that this mod and these style of mods, I've always thought they did nothing, and I didn't want to test them because I couldn't imagine them doing anything. I just rationalized it in my brain. But after testing it A/B, and I did multiple runs of this, by the way, I just don't have them put up because there's no reason to do it, but it runs the same with you install this engine.ini mod or not. And I think we should all talk about why we think people think these do things, actually, because I feel like this is a big part of it. Like, why does this mod have 300,000 unique downloads? Why does,
placebo, desperation?
Yeah,
like, what do you guys think?
Well, I've just been spending the last couple of minutes watching this run through, and performance can be better. Not dramatically so. Performance could be worse. Tellingly, you look at the frame time graph, and there's not much going on. The runs are slightly desynced, so you could actually see that. You could actually see that the frame time spikes are still happening, pretty much in exactly the same places, just with a slight offset. So yes, that isn't really doing anything. So the question is, of course, I don't know, maybe just think people just think ini mods do something. Maybe historically there have been examples, because we've never really, we've always assumed that they don't work because I think going back all the way to Arkham Knight, that was where the ini mod thing really sort of gained traction, because the game was so bad. And, fundamentally that was because the PC port didn't really respect the fact that the PC doesn't have unified memory. So there was a lot of problems going on there, which no manner of ini mod is going to fix there. And so maybe people just think, okay, it's a done thing. Maybe it works. Maybe if there was an expert in Unreal Engine, but maybe even someone from Epic themselves to come forth and basically say, well, you can change that, but it's not going to do anything. Concept, the funny thing is, of course, looking at these runs, obviously I'm only looking at a YouTube side-by-side video here that you've supplied, Alex, but, they seem to be making a lot of tweaks, but you'd expect, if you're changing things like TSR, there to be an obviously noticeable difference between the runs, and there isn't.
Yeah, like this.
Oh, you're using DLSS, so that's not going to make.
I'm using DLSS. Anyway. Like they're changing TSR values though that are like standard TSR. Like the game's going to ship with those TSR values already enabled. Right. This doesn't really matter. For me, I feel like one of the classic reasons why people feel this does something is because they run through an area of the game that does have a lot of unavoidable hitches, and they go, man, that sucked playing that. And they go online and they download this mod, and they're already advanced. They're in some different area of the game that is not a A/B test of the exact same situation, and they play it and it's different, and they're like, wow, this must have changed things. And I think that's one thing that happens quite often. I think another thing that happens quite often, and it does technically apply to Oblivion as well too, is there probably could be some missed shaders in here. I wouldn't doubt it. It's a big game world, right? If someone went through an area that had shader compilation hitches, and then they played it and they thought it sucked, and they downloaded this mod and they played that area again, and the core issue was a shader compilation stutter, the causal feeling a person might have at that moment would be like, oh, it must have been this ini mod that made the game run much better. Then they download a driver again and same thing happens, right? So I feel like there's a lot of, like, you can see things actually happening in front of you, and you connect the wrong dot as to why something is running better. And I think that's the way these ini mods got so popular over time, especially in the early D3D12 era, when no one was caring about shader compilation and every game had shader compilation stutter, especially the Unreal ones, and people just thought like this is doing something. But in reality, I mean, I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to say this doesn't do anything. And I would really love for someone to give me hardcore evidence that it does work if you're going to insist upon it. But I think this is something we should maybe take a look at again in the future. Maybe there's going to be an article about this, maybe with some quotes from people from Epic, because I think it would be great to myth bust this so we can start actually concentrating on the real problems facing PC gaming that we just can't avoid, and we should expect better products from,
I think ultimately it's down to the developer to make these fixes rather than relying on the community to do it.
Right.
I mean, this is not to say we're not sort of completely ruling out all community mods as not doing anything, but certainly there are sort of, once you understand the reason why a stutter is happening, then it kind of rules out, tiny tweaks actually making a difference.
Yeah.
I feel like community stuff makes more of a difference for adding features that are absent, like games with limited FOVs or like, various things
HDR,
like that.
some games can do
HDR. There's a lot of games that are just missing stuff, and the community things can add to it, and that's awesome.
That's a very different situation.
Just quickly, John, on the topic of Oblivion Remastered, we do actually have some information from Bethesda which says they are aware of the issue and things are happening, right?
Yeah, they did it. I did hear back from one of them over there, and it was noted that they say they have narrowed down the source of the stuttering to an issue related to players crossing from one cell into another. The fixes include a mix of code optimizations along with some specific fixes from Epic related to cell streaming. So they have a fix in progress and are currently testing the release for future updates.
Oh.
So they are working on stuff in the background, as you would expect. It's, disappointing that it shipped in the way it did, but it's not something that they're just sitting back on, at least.
Right.
I think the thing that's slightly concerning for me, though, Alex, is that the whole concept of the stuttering moving around the environment goes back to the original game.
Yes, it does.
It's a foundational issue that if you're going to do a remaster, should probably be like one of the first orders of business.
Yeah, and it was like when when Crisis Remastered came out, do you remember like how my video was like, I like the visual tweaks they did for some stuff, but they didn't solve the core issue, which was like how single-threaded Crisis was. And then with patches, they actually made the game much more multi-threaded, if you recall. So that was something that was wonderful to see. If I were remaking or remastering a game, I would probably look at the standard community complaints and I would try and address them. I think that is something maybe they didn't do for this aspect of the re-release.
Well, at least it seems that the developer is aware and is looking to make improvements. So I guess we'll follow that up if and when it happens. But yeah, I do quite like the idea of doing a whole sort of thing on performance enhancing mods and as to whether they work or not. That could be quite amusing and indeed informative.